evening and welcome to Season 8, Episode 11 of Inside the Rookery. Today we're talking about our favourite things in the Gamingverse as a celebration of our birthday. Hooray!
Woo! Happy birthday to us! Happy birthday to us!
My serpents are all a little too erect, excuse me.
It's not so much a coiled crown as a very aroused crown.
I apologise if there's any echoes. There was a bit in the countdown, but I think they might have righted themselves. Yay. So, as always, we asked our Discord server community, our patrons, to ask us questions, and they have done so. But I have also added some quickfire questions and add your questions for us in the chat as well. Best birthday present. Ooh.
Well, I think the best birthday present ever to us would be for you to all, right now, to go to that lovely link sitting at the bottom of the screen a few moments ago and go buy yourself a copy of Dark Deeds, which is sitting right behind me over there, because it is an extraordinary game. And on Dark Deeds, we are going to be playing the game, well, at least 3 of us are going to be playing the game live next Friday. So more about that will be over on the Lawhammer channels, and I'll put a post up about that over on Discord as well, over on the Rookery side. It's going to be super fun. Tricky treats.
Tricky treats. Thank you very much. So let us jump into the questions. What have we got first? Oh, it's a book question first.
Oh.
Suejan asks, each of your top 5? 10? Oh
10?
My God,
Holy crap!
We'll go to Andy Leask first. He's bound to have a massive list of favourite books. Could you just be here? Do you have to do it like me and composers? You have to split it into nationalities or genres or...
I've got a list of favourite books, but narrowing it down to a number is something that only a psychopath would do.
Well, there you go.
Let me rev up the chainsaw and I'll tell you. I can say I can probably come up with at least 5 books that I love.
Good start.
It would be easier to come up with top 5 authors. That I could probably manage.
Okay, go for authors then.
Number 1, Michael Chabon. Number 2, Kazuo Ishiguro. Number 3, Michael Ondaatje. Number 4, Ursula Le Guin. And number 5, Ian Banks.
I didn't hear number 4. To me, it sounded like you said Harley Quinn.
Ursula Le Guin.
Ursula Le Guin. Well, it does sound a little bit like Harley Quinn.
So, favourite books for me are often not as deeply rooted in best literature as they are in most influential upon me at various points in my life. Like, for example, I have a favourite book, which is terrible, objectively bad. But because I read it at just the right age, it, to this day, makes me smile to think of it. And that's a set of fantasy books, The Belgariad, which are good.
God, yeah.
I mean, they're really not good. I went back to them like an idiot with my adult eyes, and that was an extremely bad idea. But nevertheless, I still kind of love it. In the same way, I read all of the works of Michael Moorcock throughout my teen years when I was an angsty, hair down past my waist teen. And thus, the works of Michael Moorcock are engraved into my soul, and also engraved into a significant amount of the fantasy we know and love today. Even D&D had stats for various Michael Moorcock-esque stuff back in the day. And Games Workshop, obviously, slightly cribbed, lifted entire concepts from Michael Moorcock. But when it actually comes to individual favourite books, I find it really tough. It's funny, because literally the book that I was about to say, I've now forgotten the name of. I'm still on my road to recovery. I'll come back to it. I'll let Mark go while I try to remember it.
No, I'm kind of saying that there's I wouldn't know great literature if it hit me in the face. So the books I love are always a bit genre, a bit pulpy, I suppose, but a bit swashbuckly. You know, it's why I love Robert E. Howard and Fritz Lieber and Lovecraft. Joe Abercrombie. I've enjoyed his sort of rip-roaring adventures. There's a book by Mark Chadbon called The Silver Skull, which just tickled all my genre buttons. You know, it's a story of The premise is fantastic. It's Elizabethan James Bond, but he's fighting the Spanish, who are aided by the Fae. There you go. There you go. And that's everything I want in a fantasy novel. Is it great literature? I don't know. I really enjoyed it. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of the stuff I tend to go for.
There's a
Hyperion.
series of books that are in the Napoleonic era, but with dragons. I can't remember what they are, but they're
Rare?
yeah.
Yeah.
The book I was trying to remember the name of was Hyperion. I loved Hyperion. Really good book. On the sci-fi side, Dan Simmons, drawing upon the Canterbury Tales in its own way. And it's just really nicely put together. Really lovely book. But most of the books I really love are the ones that I read when I was either younger or, strangely enough, when I was doing uni stuff. Like, to this day, Orlando still sticks in my head. And I've gone back to Orlando more than once for different reasons each time. Pardon?
So how can I forget about Virginia Woolf?
Virginia Woolf, exactly. And Orlando is a truly great little book. Love it. For so many reasons. But, each their own.
We're having some issues with your mic, Andy Leesk. Or maybe it's just me, but he seems to be cutting in and out a little bit.
Oh, bums.
Maybe
I
it's
can't
just
really
me.
tell because my headphones are precariously perched about my hat. So I can only hear half of what everyone's saying anyway.
I'm not going to do favourite books because I did them a few weeks ago. Andy's list is just every White Dwarf and all the Warhammer Fantasy Battles
Yeah.
army books.
Yeah.
I do have a pile of white wolves, not white wolves, white dwarfs over there that we had for the White Dwarf anniversary episode, and I've put them all in order, which was quite satisfying to do, with the oldest one on top. And the oldest one at the time, I think I found an older one since then. So yeah, at the time, the oldest one was something different, but now it's issue 74, but it's lost its cover. It's
Very
quite
sad times.
Oh, now this. So what was on the cover? This will separate the
Eagle, perhaps.
Is it the Eagle Rider 74?
I think it is.
For February 1986.
Pretty sure it is the Eagle Rider, Mark. We're both thinking the same place there. Yeah, I think it is. Although it now makes me want to go look it up. One of my favourite things about looking through old White Dwarfs is leafing through and going, "Who's that gorgeous person?" And going, "Oh, it's Mark. Oh, look at his lovely flowing locks."
It's true. I was gorgeous back in the. It's true.
The cover is by Frank Bruner.
And it's not an Eagle Rider, I don't think.
Oh, isn't it? Which one is it?
It is like a guy on a sort of throne, a kind of necromancer-looking dude with the horns.
I know the one.
Yeah, sitting on like a throne like that.
Yep, got him. Gosh, I haven't seen that one for ages. Golly.
Which is the one we're thinking of then? Which issue was the one with the guy on? No, not that one.
Not that one. No.
He's an Eagle Rider.
It is, but yeah, no, not that one.
I'm the Eagle. Anyway, we can spend the whole hour talking.
77 has a woman riding a flying thing, but it's not an eagle.
Oh, that might be it.
No, it's not the one I'm thinking of.
I'm going to go check 77.
Just distracted by the letters page of White Dwarf 81, September 1986.
It's not 77. No, the one I'm thinking of is blue.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking. We're thinking of the same color.
Yeah.
And we both think it's 77, and it's clearly not.
And it clearly isn't.
Turning Leaf, so Dan Simmons does some good stuff. Yeah, both the Hyperion cycle and Ilium. I really liked Ilium. I thought that
Ilium was pretty crazy.
You're thinking of
awesome.
76.
76. Thanks. There we go.
76.
Just
Really? We're one issue out. That's still pretty good.
That's pretty good.
While we're on books, just it reminded me that I hadn't opened yet. This is my Folio Society edition of The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay by Michael Chabon, which I would highly recommend. Not necessarily this ridiculously expensive copy of it, but a perfectly ordinary paperback will suffice. But it is very good.
I've done some reorganizing in this room, and I'm now pleased to report that the books are in color order.
Yep. Welcome to the libraries in our house.
But Andy Leesk, it's allowed because it's for our characters. Blue for Birdie, yellow for you, orange for Sage.
Still there.
There's a genuine reason.
Rather than the bullshit reason you had before.
I think that white dwarf was a bit dusty. Maybe there was some mold on it. I don't know. Cold and Chaos says my fave is Tolkien for obvious reasons, followed very closely by Patrick O'Brien and his Aubrey Maturang series. I don't know. If
I'm interested.
Master and Commander.
Yeah, that's Master and Commander. I read Hornblower rather than Master and Commander as a kid. So I have slightly different preferences in that front. And on the more pulpy side, pardon?
Sharp for me.
Yeah, there you go. And on the more pulpy side, I was deeply into my John Carter of Mars, and of all things, Doc Savage for the pulp reading. That's some proper pulp fiction, if ever there was some. So yeah, on the Tolkien question, I've too often my shame, depending on the circles that I'm walking in, never been a huge fan. I liked a lot of what he did, but it was just never my favourite. Lindsay's vanished. Oh, bye, Lindsay.
Can you still hear me?
I can still hear you, yeah.
So it says that my camera was unplugged, but my camera is an internal camera. So
well, it looks like you'll be reconnecting then. So
I still go. Let me bring up the next question. So you can talk about it after its favorite dice, but you can continue with Tolkien while I try and.
Sure. So yeah, Tolkien. I came to, let's say, respect in my later years. So I went back and I read it again, and I read it again reasonably recently, like about 10 years ago. But I never loved it in the way that I loved lots of other fiction, because I either read it too early. I read The Hobbit when I was about 8, and all Lord of the Rings when I was about 9, 10. And it was dry, it was dusty, it was over-wordy for me at that age. And whilst I got through to the end, it just didn't tickle me in the same way that a lot of the pulp writers of the era absolutely did, because they were far more direct, far more immediate, and often written by people who were by trade journalists rather than by trade linguists. And because they were journalists, they were all about getting the point across and getting to the point swiftly. And as a young reader, I absolutely appreciated that. But as an older reader, I think my preferences got hard baked in. So when I came back to it, I was always a little bit, it's all right. It's all right. I get what it did, but I don't have the same love that everybody else does. And I always feel a little bit like I'm in the outside of that particular in crowd when everyone's sort of falling in love. Having said that, though, still love the movies. I have a lot to say about the TV series, but love the movies. I have a lot to say about The Hobbit as well. But okay, no, I love the original trilogy.
Yeah, I guess it's like me and the Beatles, right? Like you respect the influence and the impact, but it's not necessarily your flavor of choice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Same with me. I read The Hobbit when I was about 8 or 9, and then didn't come to Lord of the Rings until my mid-teens, because it's a giant. In the interim, I'd read all the Robert E. Howard stuff, and I was used to the short story, pulp fiction sort of stuff. So to even look at Lord of the Rings on the shelf there as this enormous tome, I thought, okay, I'm not ready for that yet. And it was a slog for me to get through it, particularly as it went on. The Fellowship I enjoyed, and then it just, oh boy, it turned into a bit of a to get to the rest of it.
That was very much how I felt with it as well.
For me, it was a much more enjoyable reread when I went back and reread it after I'd watched Peter Jackson's movies, because
I'm listening, as I said the other week, I'm listening to Andy Serkis read through the books right now, and I'm enjoying that very much.
Yeah, because it was what I found quite fun was quite a lot of the lines, the funniest lines in the movies, are lifted straight from the book, and which I didn't quite appreciate when I watched the movies. I felt like, because it had been ages since I'd read the books, I felt like they'd introduced some things, but actually a lot of that dialogue is just straight from Tolkien, which is not what I remembered. I didn't remember him painting those kind of that camaraderie so well.
Yeah, that's really nice. Yeah, it's like Gimli has some of the best lines in the book, and he's kind of like, very few of them made it through to the movie, which is a bit of sad. I mean, obviously you've got to edit, but it's like, oh man, all those really great characterful, deep dwarven sentiments are kind of, most of them get sort of washed away. Yeah, yeah.
And not to dwell on this particular subject, I would be remiss if I did not say that I also have a deep, abiding love of horror novels. And for all I haven't read many this last decade or so, I nevertheless grew up on them. Ranging from the classics, our Stephen King's and our James Herbert's, right down to a whole bunch of relatively little-known British horror pulp authors that I literally devoured as a child. I went through so many books.
If I was big Clive Barker fan.
A huge Clive Barker fan, for example.
I never
absolutely.
read any Clive Barker until we were sharing a flat together. And then
yeah,
all of your Clive Barker. And, yeah.
So what set me off on Clive Barker, and this may be an unexpected route into the wonderful, weird, and particularly horrific and over-sexualized worlds of Clive Barker, was Saturday morning BBC TV. Because Clive Barker came on for an interview with Sarah Green, of all people. And he was there. Presumably his publicist had gone, I know, the best place for you to go is kids TV. And he'd gone on and he described his worlds. And I was like, holy shit, this sounds great. And yeah, I picked that book up. It was the original Weave World edition. So it was a red copy with the carpet in the front. And within like the first couple of chapters, it goes pretty crazy. And I was hooked. I was a teenager at the time, about, I don't know, 13, 14, I'm going to guess. And absolutely fell in love with that, and then went back to his books of blood, and then from there went on to Imagico, and that was released a little bit later. But yeah, I really liked Weave World, and it was quite it made quite an impression upon me in terms of modern fairy tale fiction, in terms of the impact of the old and the fantastic and the lost, and how that could be reproduced into and woven into the modern world and how it could be used. And in many respects, it was slightly ahead of the curve in terms of that genre, because it became almost a primary genre, particularly for young adult fiction. The idea of the fantastic sitting just tantalizingly out of reach, and you as the special talented child, whether you be a god or a secret fairy or a vampire or whatever else it might be, can then access this secret world and all of its magic and mysticism. And Weave World very much ahead of that curve, trend-setting in a respect, but certainly not the trend-setter, because there'd obviously been other books that had dealt with similar subjects. But for me, it was the seminal work that set the whole thing off, and I adore it.
Is the graphic short story, The Yattering and Jack, is that...
That's from the Books of Blood. Yeah, The Yattering and Jack.
Yeah, that's Clive Barker, right. Yeah, the Books of Blood were excellent. They were my first, because through you, my first introduction, actually, to, like, graphic novels, graphic stories, and I really enjoyed that. And they're really well constructed, again, like modern, not fairy tales, but not morality tales, like nothing like, I can't think of the word, but that kind of modern mystery.
Yeah.
Was really excellent, yeah.
It's funny, it's because of graphic novels that I was late to Clive Barker, because when I was in primary school, I got my hands on a graphic novel from like some Hellraiser stories, and they were so horrific that it just put me right off. I was like, yeah, no thanks, he's not for me. And then
100% for me.
Well, also, like a lot of his other stuff, like Magic and Weave World, is nothing like as gory as like it was. Like I remember there was one story in particular, and it was somebody put like razor blades in a piano. So that he would like slap, and it just was. I was in primary school. It was too much. I was like, yeah, no thanks. No.
I can thank my mum for that, because she was a great lover of horror and used to really enjoy illustrating horror-y things for fun as well. So she did love a good blood spatter, and I very much grew up on that. So yeah, that merged nicely with her commissions of things like deer and war scenes from the 1900s, which she did for like Marconi or something. She did love her oil paintings.
Like Clive Barker, if you read Clive Barker today, if you read Imagica and some of his other works, you wouldn't get the impact that they had in the 80s and 90s when Section 28 was still in place in the UK. The AIDS epidemic, like his life as a sex worker and a gay man, are so integral, and his life in the queer community are so integral, especially in something like Imagica, that I just don't think if you read it today, it would have, you'd need to know that context, I think, to understand like how powerful his writing was and the things he was musing upon.
Yeah, and to a degree as well, there's a touch of iconoclasm there as well, as he was attempting to take the standards of the time and shatter them a little, and to say, look, there is a far broader picture we can go from. Because he was, in many respects, growing up in a world where fantasy and horror had almost fallen into trope. And he was looking at doing something different with it that spoke to his experiences, and I think it very much shows in his work. I'm very fond of them.
I had no idea about that context. Yeah, because so for some people, reading, is it a Magica? Who's the character in a Magica that changes their appearance?
Pyopa.
Pyopa. Yes. So for a lot of people reading about Pyopa, if you came from, like I did, a little sheltered corner of the world, like that's the first time you'd ever have encountered someone who was maybe non-binary, or like I didn't have a TV. I'd never seen a drag queen. I'd never seen a non-binary person. I didn't know what transgender was then. So it was all new in a way that today, like, it just wouldn't be new. To young people, they'd be like, yeah, I understand who Pyopa might be.
It was just not to riff on it for too long, but I read it at the time. I recommended it to many friends at the time, and it instigated a host of conversations about that and more that almost certainly would never have been discussed about what was, broadly speaking, a very white, Scottish, relatively straight, although we were all of that time when half of our friends didn't realise they would be gay in around about 5 years' time, or somehow otherwise engaged. It was very much no, we're all straight, and anything that's gay was seen as a slur or something equivalent. And it was, for many people, an eye-opener, quite literally, as you were saying. And a door into something they had not considered before, which I think, if anything, made it a brilliant book.
But let's get down to the really, like, serious question. Martin asks, favorite dice? Why is it your favorite?
I'm going to go
prepared.
Yeah, it's the only. Lindsay and I were chatting a little bit before we went live, and she talked about favorite things. And, oh shit! The only thing I've thought about was my favorite dice. I've determined it's the D8. It's a little bit sexier than the D6, and yeah, it's restrained. You're not getting into the mad D10s, D12s, D20s. A good solid D8. That's my go-to if I have to pick a favorite dice. It's a D8. Color-wise, I like a nice bone dice.
A bone die, yeah.
Classy bone D8 for me.
See, having just started playing with actual bone dice, I'm finding I'm not loving them. Because already the edges are getting like rounded off, which I think is going to affect the probability of any kind of roll. So now I'm only using them when I actually use my bone dice in character. But even then, I don't know how long they'll last. But.
Oh wow!
Well, that's a thing.
I'm not sure where this came from. I thought you guys preferred D12s. I'm not sure. Like, a D12 is good because it factorizes. You know, a 12 in general as a base numerical system is probably better than 10. But
so I have preferences as to faces. My natural go-to die, purely because it's been so influential in my work, is D10. And that's also because I work in base 10. So the mathematics there is super easy and convenient, and it's something that's almost hard-coded into my mind and I no longer need to think about. It's just there. However, if I'm talking about my favorite dice for building games with, probably a D6. Purely because the odds there are so much sharper and not easier to manage, but certainly easier to maintain in terms of building good balanced rule sets that also include randomity. D10s are swingy, big swingy dice, and a 1 is massively different to a 10, where on a 1 to 6 result, you can control the results a lot more easily, particularly if you're using multiple dice. So if we're just talking about what I like to work in, D6s, D10s because of history. In terms of how they look, I still have a hankering to my old D100, quite literal, 100-sided mega ball of doom, which is ridiculous.
It would never stop rolling.
Yeah, quite. It just rolls off the table down the street. It's like
we're still waiting for the result of that test.
On top of spaghetti, all covered in cheese. I left my D100 until somebody sneezed. It rolled off the table. Yeah, that.
on a really hard surface too to get it. Otherwise, you can't quite tell
No,
what side it's
rubbish.
actually stopped on.
Yeah, quite. So, beyond that, I don't actually have favorite dice. A lot of gamers have dice, particularly if they
Look,
role play, where they get
I
themselves a
can't touch
favorite
them.
set.
Like these are Andy's bone dice.
Oh yeah. Don't touch. They might fray.
No,
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
find it too disgusting to touch them.
Because they're actual bone.
I picked
Yeah,
them up.
and weirdly,
when we were at
I'm the
shop.
vegetarian here.
Oh
When we were at
man.
Tabletop Scotland, I picked them up and they were like, they're real bone. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah, it didn't bother me at all. So I don't have favorite dice, as in like a favorite set to roll or a lucky set. I've never been that guy. I'll just take any old dice, roll them, and go. If I'm attempting to make a show of it, so to say, so you're demonstrating a game or you're doing something for camera or something similar, having dice that look good for that or are from the game at hand, sure, but it's not because they're a favorite. It's because it best shows what you're attempting to demonstrate. So yeah, no faves here.
Clarity is the key thing. I think clarity is way underrated in terms of dice. There's all these beautiful bright colors. They're like great, they look really pretty, but you cannot fucking read the numbers.
Yeah.
The primary purpose of that dice is so that I can read the numbers. So I think
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the dice where they will drop the game's logo on or the arm
On like a 0 or a 1.
on the 1 or the 6, because it's like, how is that that's the 6, that's the highest, that's what you decided to substitute. It's just very gimmicky, and again it I mean, I'm not the most numerically competent, so it means if I roll dice like that, I've got my brain's got to go, hang on, that symbol, what's that again? Is that the 6? Okay, and it's just that delay, that extra calculation I have to make before I add the numbers up just annoys me.
Yep, agreed.
These are good
Maybe
ones.
I should say
Andy
that
got me these. They're metal and they've got a nice heft. They're
Nice.
very clear. They make a good rattle.
There's a story to those dice. So I was down at Dragon Meet, and the charity auction had begun. And the charity auction was as normal for these things, with people coming up and they were bidding a couple of things for the stuff they wanted. Me being me, I was like, this isn't the point. The point here is actually charity. You're here to try and make some money. So this set of pink dice came up and I thought, nah, I'll buy them, why not? So I bid something like 10 quid. Then everyone was like, oh, someone said 20, and then I said 30, then it all died down. So I went 40! And then bet against myself again, 50! Until eventually I reached my limit, and someone bet against me by giving me an extra tenner. Gregor Hutton, who's out there, by giving me an extra tenner so that I could add it on top. So I outbid him with another tenner on top. And we ended up buying this set of dice for £110, which is, strangely enough, an awful lot more than they were worth. But that was the point, and it changed the whole tone of the room. Because then everyone was laughing because obviously I was being an idiot. But other people started bidding against each other on the stuff that was pointless and silly. You know, here's an auction for, you know, this just silly little thing that somebody's dropped into the charity auction because it's their new thing and they thought they'd give somebody a copy and it's lovely and it's worth $6.99. And they started going for 40s and 50s. And that was lovely because suddenly everybody's there for the right reason. That's to try and make some money from charity. And geek people are the best people. We're all super friendly. We all want to be nice. And just having that excuse to do so, I thought was worthwhile. It was super fun.
Nice.
Charity auction for the win. So glad those dice are still around.
Yeah, they're a full set, but I don't really use the other ones because obviously we're playing Warhammer just now. But they're in their box, the other ones.
I just noticed Kidane's comment.
Kadane.
Yeah, I know that one, Kidane.
Oh, I've hit the
Yep.
I'm there looking for large print dice. Yeah.
Yep. Getting old. I'm now at the age where dyeing my beard looks like a good idea.
Yeah, very annoying to read in the heat of the moment. Dice with Roman numerals on. I would agree.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, on that, just as a small aside, I mirror mark in my dislike of dice that are difficult to read. And when, for example, we were doing the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set, the dice for that were not dice that I designed. If they had been, they would have been probably quite different. Instead, what happened is we went, I think it was Q Workshop, and we said, we'd like some custom dice, please. And they went, well, as it turns out, we've got some that we made for Games Workshop that they didn't pick up. There was a reason they didn't pick them up, but they were exceedingly cheap. And when you're trying to put together a starter set, exceedingly cheap, ka-ching, ching, ching, when your budget has already gone way out of balance because your initial idea of let's just do two 24-page rulebooks has been twisted right up the back of their arms to two 64-page rulebooks, meant that, cheap dice suddenly looked like a good idea. So the dice that are sitting inside the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set are not the dice I'd have preferred. They're not the easiest to read, but they do the job.
Here's the next question. Martin asks, favorite miniature. Why is it your favorite faction, NPC, PC it's associated with? Ease of painting, the smooth sherry oak cask underneath. Yes, so what's your favorite miniature?
Oh, that's a shout and a half.
It's hard, that question.
Oh, God. Something by Jez Goodwin, almost certainly.
Those Elder.
Well, I mean, yeah, I've just seen they've just put a new Fuegan out, and
I saw that.
Elder, what is he? Phoenix Lord, isn't he?
Phoenix Lord.
It's like, well, it's exactly like the original design because it is. We don't need to change it, so that's awesome. No, it won't be a Zelda. It'll be something. It won't be that. It'll be something.
I can say which one definitely isn't. The old metal Nagash. Nope.
Bozo the Clown.
I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into that discussion. Because
particularly, and not to tie it down to Mark in any way here and why I didn't like it, but particularly because we'd had the Undead Army list out for a while. So we're talking all the way back in about 1995. And we'd had the Undead Army list kicking about maybe 96 for a while. It was 4th edition? 4th edition. I think it's 4th edition. It's probably 94, actually. It doesn't matter what the year was. And Mark had done this lovely full-page illustration of Nagash. And it was lovely. And I remember looking at it going, holy fuck sticks, yes. Let's have ourselves some of that. But we were in the era of Games Workshop miniature making where you could never be certain that the miniature maker at hand would make the same thing. And I think it was Trish Morrison who did that one.
Gary Morley.
Was it Gary Morley? Thanks. And it just wasn't the same. And I won't go into details for why I disliked it so much, but it certainly was no Mark Gibbons reproduction. And for me, that was a crime.
Well, Gary tells the story that he, as he recalls it, he and I were working on our respective pieces simultaneously, and he didn't see the art and I didn't see the miniature until they were finished. I don't know if that. I don't know. I was certainly doing the art not based on anything else, and apparently he was doing the sculpt not based on it. Maybe he'd been given like the rough sketch I'd done of the finished art, but when he saw the art at the end, he went, yeah.
Yeah, quite a different outcome. Favorite's tough, though.
Ed says I hear that Ed guy is a lot of your favorite things.
Oh, I don't know. I don't know who this Ed Sylvester guy is who's coming in our comment stream. But he's well wrong.
He's giving me real Peter from the series The Great energy right now.
Oh, The Great. Have you seen The Great? You should watch The Great. If you're out there, go watch The Great. It's on Channel 4 right now. You will appreciate the Emperor for reasons. Yeah, huzzah! But that aside, if I was going for favourites, so one is a complete cop-out because it was a conversion I did of a Farseer, and it was a favourite because it was the first time that I moved beyond doing a simple kit bash. And it was a proper, complete recreation of what I felt a Farseer should look like, because we just had at that point the first Eldrad Ulthrim model, and I really liked it, but it made all the other models look pants by comparison. So this is back when they're in the metals. So I went and did myself a Farseer conversion. It was a proper tip-to-toe conversion. I ended up selling it after I left Games Workshop for a couple of £100. But I was delighted with that model. I sold it in a big grumpy ex-Games Workshop huff, as I recall. As you do when you leave a company. I think that was for the second time, when I left for the second time from Games Workshop. But if I was going to go for one that was my favourite that was pre-done, that's really tough.
I'm probably going to go with one of Jez's early metal Chaos Sorcerers.
Oh, which one?
Oh, maybe Stab. The guy who's hunched with a sword.
Yeah. He's great.
Maybe that guy. Or the the champion of Slanesh with a snake lower body and the 3 arms.
So I adore that miniature. Absolutely adore it. I've painted that one about 10 times in a variety of different ways. My very first Slanesh, what were they called? I was about to say cult, not cults. Your warbands, thanks. My very first Slanesh warband, when we were playing back with the old Realms of Chaos books, used that miniature. My Nurgle one had a completely standalone conversion that I made out of an old cyborg from the Talisman sets. Yeah, I adore that miniature with a passion. The Kinky Chaos set, I quite like that. The one that was based off John Blanche's model. I like that. Painted that one quite a few times as a kid as well. But it's really hard. Unlike my novels, I'm not as completely won over by my youthful preferences as I am with what is just some of the more recent gorgeous models as well, many of which I've just looked at and gone, they're lovely.
Yeah, I mean, in that, the sort of the aesthetic that sculptors like Jez established back in the day has sort of permeated through now, and it's almost like, you look at the latest plastics, and the vast majority of them are at that level, which makes it from Jez so much more meaningful, so much more significant when you see it set a template in when you're having to sculpt it 1-to-1 in putty, and it's going to be pressed in a rubber mold, so that it's got to be 2-dimensional by and large. And you go, man, the things you could do considering the constraints. When those miniatures still hold up to what's being made today, it's like, wow, doubles the testament of his work. So
I think my favorite is a Blood Bowl miniature that Andy Law converted from me for my team, the Slaneshi Saints, and it was the Chaos Warrior, but it was converted. I think it was converted from Jane Czar, or
it wasn't. No, it was converted from a Dark Elder.
Okay,
it's one of the Dark Elder models, with a mixture of chaosy bits and other nonsense added on, and
it had a real fluidity of movement. Mark, to your point, it had become really 3-dimensional, chaotic, so 4-dimensional, obviously, in the boundaries of space and time. But yeah, it was excellent, and the color scheme was pink, sort of a fuchsia yellow, lemony yellow and a turquoise, and it was all flowing ribbons and stuff. It was an excellent miniature.
Nice.
I'd forgotten about that one.
Her somewhere, but
bye.
Bye.
I'm going to go controversial. Much as and again, the Eldar, particularly the new Eldar avatar, would probably be up there.
Oh yeah.
Again, it looks exactly like the excellent art, but in 3D form. But I'm actually going to go controversial. My favorite's not a Games Workshop miniature. I really was really into War Machine a few years ago, and Chris Hanley, friend of the show, has done lots of Iron Kingdom stuff and has been painting lots of War Machine stuff. So it's been all over my Instagram feed recently, and it's just making me all nostalgic for War Machine. But in particular, the arcane gun mages that you get for the Signar faction from them. So it's not the big warjacks, just humans. But there's just something about the aesthetic of them. They're in this sort of steampunk fantasy world. They've got these long coats and tricorn hats and magical flintlock pistols. And there's just something about that combination of elements aesthetically just really appeals to me. And the warcaster Alistair Kane, who's sort of one of them but is a warcaster who's got 2 pistols, and it's just something about that aesthetic really, really sings for me. So
nice.
Mark McGranahan says, sorry to miss the birthday episode. I've travelled to Cambridge for the 100th anniversary feast of the Cambridge Morris men, and therefore his question is, what is your favourite / silliest folk tradition, and how would you incorporate it into a game?
So I've done it already. Dwyle flonking. Okay, so Dwyle flonking is effectively a drinking game, and it's a ridiculous drinking game. And I was working on a book that both me and Mark were involved with at one point, which was Rough Nights and Hard Days for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition. And we'd received the initial text from Graham, that's Graham Davis. And he had, I think in the original text, 3 adventures, and it was sorely lacking in what we really wanted for a full content book. So I sat down with Graham and we added another couple of adventures to it. So he got working on those, and I added in a bunch of extra stuff at the end. So I added in some gnomes, which were lovely put together by good old Mark over there. And on top of that, I added a bunch of drinking games. And one of those was a direct lift of the very real, very ridiculous Dwyle flonking, which is a team sport, which involves sloshing drinks, running circles around each other, throwing beer-soaked sponges at each other, and trying to hit other people as you're getting spun round, and a whole host of other things. If you want to know more about Dwyle flonking, you can go onto YouTube right now, type in Dwyle, spelled as you'd expect, D-W-I-L-E, flonking, F-L-O-N-K-I-N-G, into YouTube, and you'll find, I think, the 1970s report on it from the news, where they went to some Dwyle flonkers, proper Dwyle flonkers, who were practicing their Dwyle flonking in the local pub as two pubs got together with their individual Dwyle flonking teams and flonked their Dwyles at each other with a whole host of silly little special terms. And I was so amused by this that we added that to the pub games of Warhammer because it was too much fun. So there you go. It's proper stupid. And that wasn't the cheese rolling that I almost put in instead. Because cheese rolling, just too obvious.
Cheese rolling is probably the. So I was going to go with the Mary Lloyd, which is the Welsh. Horse's skull on a stick that you march around the village at New Year, and you have effectively a rap battle on the door in the doorway of every house you come up against. And if you lose, as the homeowner, if you lose the rap battle, the Mary Lloyd comes in and drinks all the booze. But the cheese rolling, it's hard to beat the cheese rolling.
Yeah.
Cheese rolling. It's a classic. For me, literally any of these various folk traditions, you get them from across the world, but where I grew in the north of Scotland, there's a whole manner of stupid ones, ranging from just local stories about why a particular stone looks like it's cut in two, and it's because that's where the last wolf of Scotland died, and the devil possessed it, and it whacked down its tail on that particular stone and shattered it, and you can drive past that stone every time I go back home to see my parents, and that's kind of cool, to some particularly horrific tales often involving spirits or going to Ternanog or some equivalent. But in terms of how would I incorporate it into a game, read literally anything we've ever written or been involved with. You'll find that all of these tales, given that we are in our own individual Celtic ways, all deeply influenced by our own upbringings, whether it's on the art side or the writing side, it's pretty much permeated through everything that we do. And as a good example of that, go check out Mother Hoarfrost, which you can go buy right now over on DriveThruRPG, because that's some proper seasonal as well, appropriate folk horror fun for any role-playing game, and is super cool too. So if you haven't checked out already, go check out Mother Hoarfrost over on DriveThruRPG.
Good call.
I was thinking,
always
I'm trying
chilling.
to think of ones that I would use that would work as an adventure hook, because that's what I'm all about. And I think there's one in Queensferry here near Edinburgh on New Year's Day. They have a thing called the Looney Duke, where people put on fancy dress and charge into the freezing cold Firth of Forth on New Year's Day. And that feels like something that some people in, like, say, the Reichland would do, like charge into the Reich on kind of a particular kind of holy day. But of course, every time one of them doesn't come back. And then therein gets into what is it that's taking them? Is it a spirit?
Oh, and then eventually they all come back. Ooh.
Yeah.
And then the adventure hook is the night when they all come back.
Yeah.
Yeah, love it.
My favorite folk tradition is guising. That's it. It's not big and it's not clever. It's just better than
Trick or treat.
trick-or-treating.
It is.
It's the best. And if you don't know what guising is what traditionally people did in Scotland and Ireland, probably made its way to North America and turned into trick-or-treating at some point through Canada. And it's where on Halloween you go out dressed up as something, and every door that you knock on, you have to do like a song or a joke. Well, traditionally like a song or a like a party trick, and you get sweets or you get money. Like, what's not to like about money?
Yeah.
Guising, as in wearing a different guise, to hide yourself from all the nasty spirits and All Hallows Eve. Good times in Samhain.
interesting because guising like comes through Middle English from Old French, and there is like more of a link between Scots and French than there is English and French, and in that kind of that 15th, 16th, 17th century era, like words like gardy-loo, which is when you like throw stuff out windows, is from French. But yeah, quickfire, controversial, raindrops on roses or whiskers on kittens.
I know what Andy's going for.
I mean, raindrops and roses, right? I'm super allergic to cats, so you can keep your cat whiskins. I mean, to be fair, I've got a little bit of hay fever as well, so I'm slightly allergic to roses as well. But significantly more allergic to cats than I am roses. So yeah, I'll take the roses. Thank you.
Whiskers and kittens. I do love a little kitten. Meow.
For sure, every time. Okay, well, something more related to gaming: bright copper kettles or warm woolen mittens.
Kettles. See, for me, the kettles was easy because the kettles are almost inspirational for a variety of different horrific things that could be living in, around, or folk tales involving them. So they feel far more useful for my writing than just a nice pair of mittens.
I didn't realize this was for writing purposes.
It wasn't. It just is now.
Because I'm like, kettles, you can make tea, coffee, crisp.
Yeah, I had a cup of tea. I had a cup of tea this morning. I live in Southern California. I never need warm woolen mittens.
Yeah.
Also, woolen mittens are quite scratchy, so as long as maybe.
I've got a couple of pairs that I really like that are like mittens, but the mitten bit folds over and it's like fingerless gloves underneath. They're really good because they can keep your hand warm, but then you can reveal your fingers when you need to do things and then put them back in again.
This is a hard one because it's like 3 options: doorbells, sleigh bells, schnitzel, and noodle.
I kind of like schnitzel, so I'm going with the schnitzel.
I mean,
I'm gonna have to go with sleigh bells because, like, I've never actually been on a proper horse-drawn sleigh.
What the fuck? We have to sort that.
I really want to go to like Innsbruck or somewhere where they still probably like have tourists who go on sleighs. But that would be amazing. Just in keeping with the Austrian theme that I have somehow procured here.
Drag this into.
Yeah.
No, not anything but doorbells, because if it's doorbells, it means somebody's outside my house, and I don't like that.
Yeah, you know what? I'm with Mark in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, favorite board game?
Go on, point at it. Go on. I think there's 3 copies on the floor.
Yeah, my copy's back there somewhere. But yeah.
No! I just dropped juice all over my table.
Oh,
should we say other than Dark Deeds? I mean, Dark Deeds is obviously all of our answer. That's the favourite. So we then go for second favourite.
Back in a mo.
Just before I'll get Susan. So Terry Pratchett collected his daughter from school in a sleigh. Actually, I used to get taken to school by my dad on his cross-country skis in my sledge. So like
there's a flood.
I've been on a sleigh, but not like a proper one with jingly sleigh bells that serves hot chocolate and Turkish delight. That's a Narnia reference, just for everyone there. So have you got a game, Andy? Is that what's happening right now?
No, he spilled.
He spilled juice all over his desk.
I thought he was going to fetch
just soaked my Cintiq, just for a bit of alliteration there.
Oh, excellent. That's how you do it.
Deary me. Yuck.
Oh, my favourite.
Oh no, I spilled it on myself. Ah! Ignore me. Nothing to see here. Favorite board games. Rah rah rah.
So this is life with Andy. This is what our viewers are getting. A little
like
high quality stuff.
Of, ignore me as he yells, "Ignore me!" at the top of his voice.
He reminds me of our daughter Laurie. Whenever we went out to a restaurant, like inevitably would always knock over her cup. But Laurie like always had like the patter. Like, but why do they even make cups like this? It is a bad design.
Well, as an early description of potential late dyspraxia, I, in my youth, so we're talking my 20s, was known by several of my friends as Andy Pint Chucker from Thurso. largely because when we went to the pub, I inevitably would, at some point, point, enthusiastically gesture, or otherwise fling an arm out in a most dramatic fashion, sending either my or someone else's pint directly into, generally, somebody else's lap. So, Andy, pint chucker from Thurso, yeah, I've just done it to myself here. Well done, Andy. So anyway, favourite games. Did anyone say one when I was off panicking?
No.
No, but Golden Chaos, I do like Scythe quite a bit. Scythe is a good game.
I like Scythe, but my problem with Scythe is it's relatively programmable. And by that I mean there are definite routes to actual success with Scythe. And whilst there is a lot of options on the table in front of you, if you get to know the game, there are certain options that are clearly and demonstrably better. To the point that once you've played it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times and you've got to grips with it, it's almost by rote. Yeah, that's the thing I do next. That's the thing I do next. That's the thing I do next.
Like
So,
Lords of Waterdeep, it's the same. Yeah.
Pardon?
Lords of
Waterdeep. I found Lords of Waterdeep a little bit less of that. It's very much a play your own game because people kept stealing your stuff and interfering and taking the cards that you want. So I found that less of an issue there.
I'm saying it as someone who played both of those games less than you and the people that we used to play those games with quite a lot. They both had the same problem for me in that I was going to go, you've all played the game more, you know how to win, and I just don't. Because I haven't played it enough.
So
it was never a level playing field.
Yeah, Lords
Agreed
of
in
Waterdeep,
that one.
I would say suffers less from that because of the randomity in the cards that come out. But we had the very unfortunate thing of playing it with people who had literally memorized the cards.
Wow.
So it was quite difficult to beat them at Lords of Waterdeep. Whereas Scythe it doesn't have that. It's got a little bit of randomity in certain bits, like things that you can get, but it is almost like a program. Like, I know in Scythe, based on the faction I am, what I will probably be doing for the next 6 turns. And so when you're playing with people who don't know the game, it's really frustrating for you because they're really slow, and it's really frustrating for them because they're making decisions that you're like, but like every turn counts in Scythe. That's going to be shit for you. You've wasted a turn, and we're going to play this game now for another half an hour. I know I'm going to win. I know you're going to be frustrated, and
that's the monopoly problem of
And the game came with like a sheet of being allowed to write down who won on it.
Achievements.
So it makes me really anxious because it's quite high stakes.
The high stake achievements.
I'm going to throw a game out that I've only played twice, but it's brilliant, and I absolutely love it. And the only reason I haven't immediately gone out and bought a copy is because to fully enjoy it, you need 8 players. But it's called Captain Sonar, and it is like an evolution of battleships, right? Yeah. So you have there's 4 of you on each team. And you are the crew of a submarine, and you're playing like Battleship. You're trying to find. So it's like a combination of Battleship and Snake. You know, the old mobile phone game Snake. In that you've got your map, and it's divided into quadrants and sections and stuff. And you're trying to find where the other submarine is, but obviously the other submarine also can move as well. And each of you has a different role. So like one of you's the captain who sort of says where you're going to move and stuff. One of you's the engineer, and you've got like a grid that's like a dry wipe thing. So if as you're moving, like you kind of have to kind of allocate stuff, and you kind of like lose access to some of your special abilities. So you need to kind of stop to kind of repair yourself, or like move more slowly to repair yourself. Someone else is the communications officer who has to try and keep track of where they think the other people are. So you've got a copy of the map with like an overlay that you're moving around. And then there's one of the things you can do is you can like ping and be like, right, are you in quadrant A? And they go, no. And you're right, okay, so they're not there. So maybe they're there. And you're sort of, but you also, what you always hear is you hear the direction that they're moving in. So they would go north to left, west 1. And you go, right, okay, so you're kind of following a line and then mapping it over the islands that you've got to try and keep track. Like it just, all of you were essentially playing a different mini game, but at the same time you were all contributing to this big thing. And the first time we played it to learn the rules, we did it turnabout. That was all very good. But the way you're meant to play it once you know the rules is how we played it the second time, which is just everybody fucking goes live. and you're just people just yelling stuff out, and you're having to listen. And as the radio operator, I'm having to listen to them more than my own team to kind of track what they're doing. And occasionally you don't hear a thing because your team are yelling in your ear, and you're like, I've lost them. I don't know where they are. It was incredible fun, and not unlike a lot of those kind of collaborative games like XCOM and things like that can be quite stressful. It wasn't actually at all stressful. It was just exhilarating and fun. So yeah, I highly recommend that.
101 Colonel said, I'm beginning to think Lindsay is secretly Andy's living cleaner upper. Oh, you sweet summer child. In the words of the Hunchback of Notre Dame, who is the monster and who is the
man? Yeah, we're a good match.
So, Golden Chaos, I think I might like Castles of Burgundy. I love Chateau de Bourgogne, as I prefer to call it, the chateau. But I find the art is so uninspirational. And even the 20th anniversary edition, I was like, oh, I was desperate for Andy to like reskin it for me in something that was like more connected to one of our games, because I find it really hard to play because I can never remember what the buildings are. Maybe to a French person, like the town hall is like really obviously a town hall, but if you don't know like the architecture,
bluntly it's shit. Yeah.
It's really hard for me to like.
It is an exercise in beige.
I think Castles of Burgundy suffers a little bit from whoever gets the mine first. Like if you don't get the mine, you're not likely to win. And obviously when the mine comes out, there's like 3 and there's 4 of you, and I don't like it. So that irritates me about Castles of Burgundy.
I'll say as a general mechanic, any game where you've got, say for example, I get so many turns or so many abilities, and any game which then says, here's an option to get an extra ability or the extra person. And this is something that's, for example, the case in Lords of Waterdeep, to discuss games we've already discussed, or Castles of Burgundy. They can be a chase to those, and the people who don't get them are almost guaranteed a loss, and they are, as a mechanic, whilst fun and super cool when you're getting them and playing with them, less fun for the overall enjoyment and balance of the game, I generally find. Not always, but generally.
Yeah, because I do find that in those games where you're going for that extra person, it feels like it's quite mechanical to begin with, because you're like, well, I need to do that, so I know what I need to do. And I quite like a game that
it becomes an algorithm.
Yeah, it becomes algorithmic. T Blam says, as a French, I confirm it's shit.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely awful. Ravensburg deserves a frickin' slap for how badly designed that game is in terms of its overall appearance. The number of times, because we really liked the game, because we played that game a lot when we first got it. And the number of times I was like, I could, but it was like 4 or 5 days worth of time that I could be doing something else with. Plus, I'd have to actually then produce it in something that would last more than like 2 or 3 goes. Yeah, fuck that. But yeah.
And the other one we suggested you reskin was Kingdom Builder, wasn't it? That was the other one.
Kingdom Builder, yeah. Yeah. Did indeed. Yeah. Ha! The things, eh?
One of my favorites for obvious reasons probably is Space Hulk.
Space Hulk. We mentioned that before. I do love Space Hulk. In particular, let me call out the first edition of the game.
Yeah, I was going to say first edition because that was the first game I worked. Not Space Hulk itself, but the Deathwing, the Gene Stealer supplements.
Damn straight.
Proper things I worked on for Games Workshop. And again, even now, I think it's still a great game.
And as I think I've mentioned in previous streams, the various Space Marine versus Gene Stealer art were some of the first pieces that I copied to death as a kid. So, hey, a first early connection, huh?
There you go.
But yeah, I did.
A great gateway game into the miniature hobby. Like that was the game I used to snag a bunch of my mates who'd never really done it to get into kind of collecting miniatures. I'll maybe just paint those Space Marines. Oh, well, maybe I'll get some more Space Marines. And then before you know it, they had.
Yeah, yeah.
It was the game that during the festival I'd take outside onto the street and do during the festival. Yeah. Doing games out on the street because it was so fast and simple to get to grips with, and it was in terms of its overall aesthetic immediately accessible because of aliens, and everybody knew what it was coded as, so they understood what was going down. They understood the big heroes in their armor, their Space Marines getting taken out by the Gene Stealer, aliens, super easy, and a number of guaranteed sales out of that. Anyone who was the right age would buy it almost instantly because it was a great game. Yeah, a lot of love for that.
the spiritual successor as a gateway game into Space Hulk was Lost Patrol, with that poor little Space Marine
Lost
scout
Patrol.
with his
You're still
tiny
going on about Lost
nose
Patrol.
on the front cover. But that game is broken and I fucking hate it. It's
Yeah.
mathematically impossible to win. You might as well play Clock Patience.
That's not
You might as well
mathematically
play
impossible
Snake
to win.
Ladders.
That's basically
Exactly.
one of, Clock Patience is a 1 in 52 chance of winning. Okay,
Well,
you have
exactly, that's what I
literally
mean.
no involvement with the win, but there is a 1 in 52 chance, which is a better
Exactly.
chance of winning than Games
The
Workshop's
fucking
Lost Patrol game. Second
Like,
edition,
who
mind you.
playtested it? Who
Yeah.
playtested it? Anyway.
Yeah, quite.
Least favorite board game that was.
Yeah, quite. You kind of flipped it on its head there.
I was once in Games Workshop playing that and just ranting at them, and I'm like, "Look, this is why it's broken." And then they all realised as we played the game that it was. And
I actually found that vaguely hilarious that the staff didn't realise, even though they've been playing it themselves for ages, that the game was impossible to win as the Space Marines. Actually impossible to win.
But
Yeah.
but I think it's like purposeful, because I don't think there's. I think it's like a prank that the designers.
I don't.
That you're just.
Well, because they're the Lost Patrol, so they never come back. Because
Well, exactly,
they have
right?
to lose.
Yeah.
Well, the first edition of the game, it wasn't impossible to win. The second edition of the game made some changes that fundamentally broke it.
Ah.
Yeah. So Jake Thornton, I think, did the first edition, and the second edition, I'm not sure who did that, but whoever did it deserves a quick and relatively swift slap.
Thanks, Andy Law, gaming historian and butler, for that information. So we got through hardly any of the questions, so I'll keep them all for another day. It's already 2 minutes past late. We're well
Seriously?
over time.
Wow.
Happy birthday to us.
Yes, happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday to us. Happy birthday to us. Happy birthday, dear Rookery. And yeah, happy birthday us. So until the next time, thank you to
I have
Andy
one thing
and
to
Andy
say
and Mark.
before we go. I do have
Yeah.
one thing to say, which is that it is our birthday. And all you lovely people out there thinking, oh, isn't that nice? Don't think that. Think, oh, I know. I'd really like to buy them a birthday present. And there is no better way to give us a gift than to give yourself a gift. Because the gift of giving is, of course, Dark Deeds, the darkest of deeds, and you can buy right now from Modifius over on their website. So do indeed go do so, because I will never stop saying this. Go buy Dark Deeds. At least 5 copies. Think about it. Say it with love. Give a copy of Dark Deeds to your loved one, to your grandparents, perhaps to your children.
Give it to everybody you know for Christmas.
Absolutely. There is no better way to say happy birthday than at least 12 copies of Dark Deeds.
You can do an advent calendar. Every day of December. You
24 copies.
copy.
Thank you. Thank you to our patrons who keep this stream gloriously ad-free. We will see you all next week for another edition of Inside the Rookery. Until then, good night.
Bye-bye.